Welcome, everybody, to the Fraudcast. We got a smaller group today. I bet a lot of people are going out on vacation. Hopefully, you guys are soon too for next week. But thanks for being here and joining us. I think I'm seeing lots of familiar faces. I don't know if we necessarily have anybody new, but I'm going to do my little spiel at the top, and then I'm going to hand things over to Vito to talk through the topic for today. So yes, this is the Fraudcast. Welcome. This is a weekly get-together that Vito and I host for folks in the fraud and risk space. And we go through trends, what people are seeing, what people are dealing with in their day-to-days and their queues. It's a really great place to crowdsource some advice and hear from other people, their stories, and what they're working on, what they're doing, integrate some of the learnings into what you're doing as well. Please, whether you have joined us before or you are new, which I don't know if we have any new people here, but either way, please do introduce yourself in the chat so we know who we're talking to and you guys can connect and continue the conversation outside of this space. Heads up, we do record these sessions for folks who are not able to join us during our regular time. And we share the recordings out with them. But if you are able to, please be on camera with us. We love looking at everybody's beautiful faces and chatting with us. But if you're not able to be on camera, that's totally fine. You can hang back and listen. And yeah, with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to Vito.
What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Michael Peasley in the house. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Great to see you. Great to see everybody. Glad you're here with the last week of freedom. Maybe some of your kids have gone back to school already. Maybe not. Who knows? But you're spending this time together with us. I'm going to make it worth your while. Phil knows what I'm talking about. You give me 45 minutes, I'll give you the world. The 10-10 wins promise. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite books here, which is, I don't know how many of you have read House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski, but it's going to tie into what we do every day here. So let me go ahead and share the old screen-a-rooney. Bada bing, bada boom. All right. So, House of Leaves, my friends. Okay. If you haven't had the opportunity to peruse this book, I highly recommend it. I mean, if I open up to just a random page here, you'll see it's mostly empty and then mostly empty again. And then it's like all sorts of crazy stuff and then more crazy stuff. It is an exercise in hermeneutics. You can read this book any way you want. Ostensibly, it is a book about a documentary, all fictitious, about a house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And the family who moves into that house becomes swallowed by the house. And the people who go to rescue the family who got swallowed by the house also get swallowed by the house. And the people who investigate the documentary get swallowed by the documentary, just as you, dear reader, get swallowed by the book itself. Yeah, the Navidson record. If you ever hear that one, that's like the hidden handshake to what goes on in this book. Highly recommend it. But I'm wondering something. It was kind of when you look deeper into some sort of a labyrinth of information, do you too get swallowed by it? Is your existing rule set a House of Leaves in and of itself? So to that end, I wanted to pose y'all with some sort of questions here, kind of get a little taste of where we're at. Check this out. When you think about your rule set, where do you kind of stand on this? You know, what are you working with, right? Less than 5, maybe 10, maybe 20, more than 20, or do you have no idea? Also, do you just not want to know? I'd love to hear where you're at with this because that'll really help us out in terms of what we talk about today. Much like my friend Mark Danielewski's book. I wish I knew the guy. Mark, if you're listening, I know you tune into the Fraudcast via YouTube. Let me know if you've got a similar problem. We see 3 out of 5 saying you got at least 10. This is interesting. One of y'all says, I have no idea and I have no way of knowing. We're definitely going to come back to that one. We see some more than 20. A lot of people with at least 10. So you've got some rules banging around the hopper a little bit. Good to know. We got a minute on here. I'll give it another 10 seconds for you to toss in there. But most of us are at least 10 rules, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if we're juggling the impact of 10 decisioning rules and we got 10 different kind of nodes as to where things come in, come out, get kind of become invisible to us, that can be pretty hairy. So I'm going to end this poll. And guess what, my friends? Here, I'm going to share the results with all of you. There they are. Cool. 11 of 19 of you participated. Very well done. Thank you. And let's throw one more out there. Why not? Because on top of that, my friends, here's the golden rule. What do they do, these rules? You've got 10, 20 of them. Are they just declining? Are they just approving? Are they doing both? Do you have no idea? Did you make these rules? Did somebody else do them? So we got 3 folks saying a little bit of both. The hold rule deal. Most of you have a combination. Okay, many flavors. Very cool. Okay, yeah, this is a runaway combo. One of y'all just has a hold rule in place just to send things to MR. Okay, I'll give another 5, 4, 3 on this. Cool. We know what's going on. You got the combination of things. And then finally, my friend, here's a share, just so you can see what I saw. 13 of 14, the combination of decline, approve, and hold. Finally, last but not least, this one really gets my goat, as we say. Last one. I used to rule the world, to quote Chris Martin. I'm going to have to sink out of this. The Coldplay move right there. Do you feel confident in doing any of this stuff? Do you feel like if you were to like rip a rule away that you would be like cool? You feel least confident in assessing the efficacy? Well, guess what, my friends? You've come to the right place today. We're going to talk all about that. Most of y'all, 64% of people respond, of counties responding here, so you have the least bit of confidence in assessing the efficacy of your existing rules. Well, my friends, let's talk all about that. So back into the Decaruni we go. So maybe it is a bit of a house of leaves situation. You've got a bunch of different flavors, got a bunch of different things going down. So let's talk about how we can do a little bit of housekeeping, assess the efficacy of those rules, and give you some options, give you some room to play with, make yourself be seen as something outside of a cost center, drive a little bit of revenue, show that there's sun pouring in through that front room and you're not just a block fraud hammer. It begins by getting inventory, and this is tough. Please, while I'm going through this, come off mute. Let me know if any of these things are roadblocks for y'all. But I can imagine some of you said, I have no idea of finding out about this, nor do I want to know about this. I can imagine this first step is a difficult step, kind of seeing what is my landscape? What do I have going on? And sometimes, much like House of Leaves, the rules themselves are almost indiscernible to the common vernacular. Like, I will reject your orders because I can, or crazy dudes getting declined since 2023, the state of Hawaii, etc. You've got a lot of things kind of populating the hopper, and maybe you don't know why, when, who did it, etc. Maybe the person who did it's gone. So let's just take one of them. Just jump on one of them. If you could look at the impact of all of your rules, maybe you get one that's been pretty fat lately, firing on a lot of stuff, like this one here, where in the last week, we've declined hundreds of thousands of dollars from this declined all Sea Caucus, New Jersey orders rule that was created by a former employee who then last modified back in 2021. This might be low-hanging fruit for us. Start with the easy stuff, my friends. Get those easy dubs. Right? Next, and this could be, an exercise in hermeneutics in and of itself, figure out why and how and all the journalistic imperative as to what this thing is doing conditionally. This one's pretty simple, but maybe it might be a little too simple, right? If it's delivering to Sea Caucus and it's a new shopper, maybe the feeling was, hey, and you've heard this before, especially in our world, we were burnt by people from this geo before. We were burnt by new buyers from this geo. We've just seen nothing but bad come out of there. And those feelings are fine. You live through them, or maybe that's what the prevailing sentiment across the business has been. Cool. All right, great. Well, I'm gonna run with that. I trust you on that. But I want to maybe poke a hole in it. If we did this back in 2021, odds are things have changed a little bit, right? How have they changed? Where have they changed? That's what you are going to figure out by doing this. Try to pull. Go ahead and pull. Don't try. Let's quote Yoda. Do pull what you can in terms of the recent orders that were declined by this. You get some sort of order list like this. Here's everything that's kind of been fired on by that. And you know you've got a team. Maybe you don't have a team. Maybe the team is the person you're looking at in the mirror. I'd put that on their plate and be like, all right, y'all, here's the stuff that's kind of come through. Here's what's been fired on by this. Let's dig in. Once we dig in, maybe we could observe a couple few things about this rule or the orders that have been hit on by this rule. For instance, when I looked into these orders that were declined by the Decline All Secaucus New Jersey orders, I see that they've got a higher order amount than was present in that initial fraud attack that came out of Secaucus in yesteryear. You know, maybe that initial fraud attack was going after 30, 40, $50 SKUs. And these are all much higher AOV. Maybe the initial fraud attack was all using discount codes. This one doesn't have discount codes. Maybe the identities there were kind of obfuscated, spam, garbage, trash. And these we can really link to actual residents of Secaucus, New Jersey. By the way, born and raised Secaucus native here. So I'm here to speak. We're not all bad, right? We're not all fraudsters, right? Trust me on that. Once you've got those outlying conditions, and this could just be in a couple of them, it doesn't need to be like, you know, an overwhelming majority of things that have the outlying condition. Create a competitor rule. Okay. We had a decline rule in place for everything coming out of Secaucus, New Jersey. Now I'm going to make an A/B test saying I'm going to approve orders that come out of Secaucus, New Jersey that also have these conditions in them, right? So yeah, it's being shipped to Secaucus. It's new buyers under 7 days old, but they've got a higher order amount and they're not using a discount code. We're going to accept that instead of decline it. It's going to skip that rule. This is your A/B test. This is your competitor. Put it in priority above the decline rule that exists. So first, they'll be caught this way. They'll be caught in a good way. They'll get the green light instead of the red light. Do this for a week, just for a few days even, and see what happens. Tag them, track them, put them on your dashboard. You approved, 100 orders over that week. How many of them came back with chargebacks? Were they truly bad? Little things like this you can take and run with, and you can have some sort of A/B test, some sort of like mirror to what's been going on for years now at your organization. And if you do this for one rule, my friends, I'm sure you can all imagine how you can do this for many other rules, but it begins with that A/B test. So, your cheat sheet, if you want to screenshot this, or if you want to check out the YouTube recording later on, it'll be there for you in a few days' time. These are the steps to kind of creating that A/B test, creating that rule that supersedes the old rule, and really fact checking the many competing sentiments that have existed in your organization for years now, that have been codified for years now, that have been taken for granted, that have joined that list of 20 some odd other rules. Maybe you delete the initial rule. Maybe that rule was good all along. Maybe everything you approved over that week comes back as a chargeback. Probably not. But do a little bit there and you'll be in good stead, especially when the volumes start to spike, especially when the big numbers come in the next few months. You know what I'm talking about. I'd just like to know what you think about that. Ben does a biannual rule audit. Ben, how does that work? What's that like? Do you get a lot of haters in the chat? Do you get a lot of pushback? Is it kind of like picking a favorite child? Do people really want to hang on to their rules? How's that been for you?
It's just good every once in a while just to look at them, just especially if you've been working on your fraud rules for a long time. Sometimes I feel like every time we write a new fraud rule, it's just like we're adding just another patch to something. And so looking back at some of those, when I wrote those rules, I looked to see if like, oh, that was specific for an attack we had. So that specific combination of rules, maybe I'll keep it so where if then situation. So if it happens to trip it, it'll go through that rule set again. But if the rest of the rules don't apply or anything that could be good orders, we'll skip the whole entire thing. And so I'll move it somewhere else to still keep it active, but not something that it's always on the front line.
So recirculating it back into your broader landscape of decisioning rules is kind of what's going on here. If you don't mind, I'm sure a couple of people of the 25 of us to say, wow, I'd like to do that. What are you using to do that? Is it easy? Did it take, months, maybe even years to figure out how to do that? Do you have any tips for people who are dipping their toes into this water?
A lot of it is just running, depending on what program you're using, to just run a general audit to see how often each rule is tripping, and just run different combinations of those type of reports to see monetary wise, or things like how many are stopping, some if it's going through or if it's being stopped per those rules. And so that helps you kind of get a better decision on, okay, well, this is stopping a lot of good orders. Then you can just go down that rabbit hole to see the combination of those, see, okay, how many of these are still good where they are, or if you have to remove it. It does take some time to actually figure that out, just because, sometimes when you wrote them during an attack, you might be kind of confusing on how you first did it just to catch something. And so maybe it's something you just need to clean up a bit, or to make it more specific, or because through the years, maybe you learn better ways to write certain rules. And so maybe changing that up a bit, instead of having three rules, those all could be combined into one rule. It does take time to figure out, you learn through the years. I think talking to other people in other businesses to see how they do it, you can learn better practices on what to be looking for.
Fantastic. I'd love to hear if anyone has had their almonds activated by everything Ben just said. But my last question for you, Ben, when you're looking at your cup of coffee dashboard, your first thing in the morning dashboard, and you're maybe just looking at some sort of basic volume chart, what's come in, what's gone out over the last 24 hours, last few days, et cetera. Is your chart, or do you have a chart that has attribution based on the rules? Like, here's my declines, but each decline is maybe in a column of its own. So it's got, this was declined by this rule, this was declined by like auto policies, this was declined by manual review. Do you incorporate that into your daily, or is this just something that you reserve for that calendar event every quarter?
It depends. Like, I have different processes for like a weekly thing where it's like a just a glance over. I have something that I usually do for specifically for the entire month. And for our type of business, especially for the very last day of the month. And so I look at those specifics, and that helps me decide how many things are around fraud rules, or how many rules are to help good orders pass better too. It has to be on both ends too. So that helps kind of reduce the amount of the workload or queue that we actually have for the review. So we have, yeah, so we have orders that auto approve, auto reject, and if they fall within a certain point range, we review those. And so there's things that I can do for my team to reduce their workload. So we focus on both ends. And in the end, a lot of that, we want to make sure it's also the customer has that best experience for the auto approve orders. So if there's ones we review that were always auto passing, okay, well, let's adjust some of those rules.
Everything you just said right there rang some beautiful alarm bells for me. And those bells are pointing toward Lynn. Lynn, I remember what you were talking about last week in terms of in terms of your team and how y'all do your reviews. I'm wondering, Lynn, if anything that Ben just shared there is something that you would think of incorporating as move toward a season that's going to have higher volume, higher impact on your team. Maybe some of this could be used to alleviate that work or alleviate those cues. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't recall what we discussed last week, but I think it makes a lot of sense, especially even reviewing those rules that auto approve that you go along for so long, especially as we enter into peak season, where you're auto approving, but are those really true positive results? Just revisiting those rules as well to make sure you're not missing anything and that some bad actors aren't sneaking in that way.
Absolutely. And that, like Ben mentioned, that customer experience for your best, they're not being held up in a manual review queue. They're not being held up to, for days and weeks to figure out if they were fulfilled or not. And then getting that sneaky little order canceled email that really drives them away. So Ben Lynn, thank you for taking up the hot seat, which in many ways was a very cool throne for both of you. Much appreciated. Let's look at the chat here. I've got Matthew coming in hot. Matthew, adding time constraints to various rules is also helpful to ensure that they do not stay active and left in place for too long. I see nods from, and I see a shaking of the head from my mentor, Michael. Matthew, what do you got to say about that? Michael, what do you have to say about that? Create debate, my friends.
I mean, you're creating more work for yourself. I mean, I get the idea behind it, but yeah, I'd love to hear more on that.
Yeah, I'm just speaking more from mistakes that have been made over the years, where you have turnover in the fraud space. And so what one person created isn't necessarily going to be relevant a year or two later. And so having those unique time constraints put on rules is very valuable in that. And it also, one of the things that I figured out and learned from leadership is that it also shows leadership that the fraud team is invested, that they're actually not just a plug and play. They're real time making adjustments, assessing the day-to-day activity, because in this space, it changes every day, as you all know. So, yeah, that's been very helpful for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, it definitely depends on your environment, how many, rules you have and things like that. But the data behind the rules is more important than the date. In my, just kind of my thoughts there. If a rule is not actually triggering, is it something that you should be auditing, or should you be looking at something that's, data wise looking maybe like it could be causing false positives, things like that, right? Based on age.
Yeah, and I agree with where you're going, Michael. The fact is I want the rule that we have. I want them to stay relevant. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's easy to just plug and play and forget about them, and they're not relevant anymore. So the time constraint to the rules has been somewhat of a help, because it generates the audit mentality with the team to say, hey, look, this is only going to run for 7 days, and then we need to reevaluate and see if it even makes sense. So,
Yeah, that's wise.
So the data, not the date, is going to be our guiding metric. Well said, highly alliterative, quite poetic. And I try to represent that with my meager skills and illustration by, if I'm looking at my 20, 30 rules, my House of Leaves style inventory, I want to start with that low hanging fruit, the stuff that is firing pretty regularly at pretty high volume, and kind of get a heads or tails. And you don't need to go like order by order for 1,000 orders. Just a couple of them could kind of point you in a direction. We're all fraud senseis here, right? You can smell these things. Maybe it's just my nose. I don't know. But you could smell these things. You could sniff if something is likely bad, really obviously egregiously bad, or could be good. So let's use that as a guiding metric. The chat is blowing up, my friends. I'm loving it. Jamie, we're talking about when fraud events fizzle out and the kind of the moving dynamic here. You also brought up a really good story, Jamie, about your early days when you had a real fight to get something hard coded. You know where my head goes to, the Susie School of Communications, and Shelley jumped in on that too. So I'm wondering if both of you can kind of talk about maybe the internal battles you had to wage to get your stuff codified, put through the back end, and put into production, how that worked, and what you would do differently knowing what you know now.
I mean, for us specifically, it was like Matthew mentioned, it was in the data, I had to fight for my place in line for resources, because our whole, group had like 2 engineers, and that's it. So, depending on what the business wants to prioritize, I had to prove that we were losing money off of it, and generally a lot of these things were pretty simple, quick fixes, quick from someone who's not an engineer, don't know the back end. So I can always say, oh, it's simple, looks easy. But yeah, we just had to really prove that it was costing us, chargeback losses, or, resource. Our group was battling, preventing those orders from shipping or intercepting them, which is a fee, and so just kind of adding up all those charges that we were incurring because of that. So that helped.
So it was a big, fat, scary number, kind of like, this is how much has hit us in X time frame. Like, it's probably worth your time to do what I'm telling you to do because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes it doesn't have to be a big number. I had some, I guess, luck with just posing it as like, this is an unnecessary loss. Like, if we could just do this, you could spend 2 hours doing this, testing it, releasing it. We didn't have to lose this much. So it doesn't have to be a giant scary number, but it's like, isn't this so stupid? Why are if we can plug this hole, then do it, like, why do we have to lose this at all? So that was kind of how I had to pitch it. It didn't have to be like, we're going to get fines or this, it didn't have to be a big scary number. It was like, this is really stupid. Why don't we just not lose this,
Shelley.
Hey, Jamie, I love the way you put that too. Why don't we just not lose this?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. And so I went through this, I don't know, last Christmas time ish. We found a process gap in communication. Two systems weren't talking to each other, but everybody thought they were. And nobody could fix that glitch because nobody's fixing anything during the holiday season. Let's not lie. Every engineer is focused on making us more money. So it was, but then also we were looking at it as trying to get a delay in shipping. It was basically if an order was canceled internally, it didn't communicate to the shippers to stop the process. So the order would still ship, but the item was refunded completely. Why does this have to happen? So I just came out in a different direction. I said, how about this? Why don't we remove permissions for canceling orders and refunding them internally? I'll fix on the engineer side. Somebody just click a button. And it took 24 hours for them to click a button. And that way we removed that access from the majority of people. And they couldn't do this anymore. And it was all internal. So now it had to be at a smaller group of supervisors who we could then feed the information to that says, do not ever do this. And if you do, I'm watching. We went from, oh my God, things are out of control and on fire to, hey, we got it under control. We're good. Now let's work on recovery. So it kind of, for me, I talk about it all the way, find the low-hanging fruit, find the easiest, quickest fix that doesn't involve as many people. Can we just remove permissions for this? Oh, look at that. We can. That's easy.
You're alluding to something that you did this brilliantly, Shelley. I'm like, while we're figuring out vectors here, while we're talking about how things happen, there's clearly another conversation with product, with admin, with somebody else who's kind of responsible for those things. You saw it as, let's get rid of, access rights in this example. Is it just a sixth sense? Is it really about knowing your product really well to see where the vulnerability is? How do you, we touch on this topic a lot. What are you bringing to the table? What are the donuts that you're bringing to say like, hey, is it really just keep it simple, stupid? Like, we shouldn't be doing this. Y'all are kind of guilty for it. I mean, I don't know if I could have that much sass when I go and talk to somebody. How do we do that?
You should try it. The sass brings a lot of people to the table. Well, no, for me, it's just a matter of logic. And I try to pull that down. Okay, let's try. I know that everybody's busy and this is not their number one priority, but this is my number one priority. So how do I communicate that? Path of least resistance, the least effort needed to lift. Oh, thank you, Sassy Susie. That is absolutely my new name. Maybe that'll be my new leaderboard name for Peloton. If everybody knows you have a leaderboard name. Currently, I'm Sparkly Ninja.
Sassy Susie hits a little.
Sassy Susie could hit a little different. I don't know. So, okay, anyway, I digress. So path of least resistance, what's the easiest way to make this happen? And it's just a sales technique to them and be like, I know this isn't your priority, but this is my job and I have to make it my priority. So what can we do? I use the term, I need to stop the bleeding all the time. I said, I can work on major fixes later, but help me stop the bleeding. And that usually gets a lot of people on board because everybody wants to help with that Band-Aid fix. I'm like, I don't care what we do right now. Just Get me a big Care Bear Band-Aid, put it over it, and we're good.
Brilliant. And I think the back end stuff, like, hey, we've reduced some conversation at some point. Hey, we've reduced friction on this group of people, thereby eliciting this uptick in conversion. That's like your brownie points potentially that could really help, lubricate that conversation. Kind of gross, elicit that conversation a little bit better. So yeah, what are we thinking about this, y'all? Like, this is anyone in here like, I want to try this out, but I still got some qualms. I still got some. I mean, there was one person, and I won't name names. It was actually anonymous. I don't know names. There was one person said, I have no idea of telling how many rules I have. And if you're brave enough, and I'm here to let you know that you are brave, bold, and beautiful. If you're brave enough, can you tell us a little bit about your struggle? Because I'm also sure that among the 25 brains here, there have been people who at first had no access to all of those rules and understanding how many conditions were at stake, and then got it. And I can promise you that they will point you toward the promised land, my friend. So if that was you, please, please jump on in, my friends.
Hey,
And if there's
Vito,
another thing, yes,
Vito, it wasn't me, but I'm gonna come off mute just for a second. I got the almonds activated, and this just reminded me of a little experience we had, and it didn't affect a ton of orders, but once upon a time when we would discover fraudulent orders, I remember the practice was, hey, we're going to block everything about this entity. We don't like this email. We don't like this phone number. And one of the things included under that umbrella was the IP address. And down the road a little ways, I remember we were very curious to find out like certain orders that were auto canceled based on some of this criteria. And I remember looking at one in particular thinking, well, gee, this looks legit, but for some reason it looks like it was canceled due to an IP address that we had put in here. And I don't, we didn't really keep track of, okay, what region or what area is this IP address? We just put it in. And I remember calling this customer and just because I wanted to know, I was curious. And I said, hey, I'm sorry this order got canceled by our system, but if this is legit, we want to make sure you have a chance to place an order and get your items. But do you remember off the top of your head where you placed the original order? And the customer told me, she thought about it for a second. She goes, you know what? I do. She says, I was at, some type of international airport. I can't really remember off the top of my head, but she goes, I had a few hours in between flights and got on the social media or whatever and got an ad or something, or pulled up my email and got an email advertisement, decided to do some shopping. And yeah, it turned out that, one of these fraudsters or one of these fraudulent orders came through at an airport, and we just kind of blindly or flippantly threw that IP address in there. Now, granted, I don't think that costs us a ton of orders, but it's maybe a little cautionary tale to be careful of that stuff, because it may not just be happening in some, swampy basement somewhere on the other side of the tracks. It may be happening in a more public place.
Yeah.
I was just going to point to you, Michael. You got to jump on it, my man. Jump on it.
Yeah. Don't block IPs generally.
Mike,
especially with mobile IPs, right? Like that.
Yeah.
It's just a disaster.
So lesson learned for sure that way.
Yeah.
Is there, if you could, Michael, I'm going to keep you on the hot seat here for a second. Do you get the heebie-jeebies when you get to a certain level of signal granularity? You mentioned IP. I feel like email's another one in a world where you can just kind of spin up emails. I feel like any sort of signal specific blocking is tough. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. It's there's definitely a range of, you could see a range of signals where they're better and then, they fall off real quick. But then I think, you're going to have different experiences, even with some of the basics, I like a device ID, right? That may be actually very useful against some fraud that you see, and completely useless against other, right? Because there are different fraud attacks happening, different sort of MOs behind them. One is very, very clearly switching up their device every single time. One is lazy. User agent strings is similar. I would put in that same bucket, right? Sometimes they're very lazy and you can find that stuff and block it because it's so specific. And sometimes, it's again, not a good idea.
Michael, I don't know if you caught Jamie's confession here in the chat, but Jamie once accidentally neg-listed the entire Gmail domain. Uh, we've got so much insight from you today, Michael. I'm wondering if you could share. Maybe did you have something like that where you did something a little?
Yeah, well, it wasn't. I could, I could
Maybe
say,
someone you know.
truthfully, it wasn't me, but it was someone that I worked with. This was way back in the day at eBay. For about 5 to 8 minutes, we blocked everyone from listing anything on eBay Australia.
Oh, mate.
Yeah.
Hey, and look, we've all lived to tell the tale, my friends. Thank you for sharing. I want to touch on one last thing here, because this is something I've been thinking about, and we're going to go back to the source, my main man, Ben Lee. Ben brings up, I would be interested in a general area where we can share fraud trends everyone is experiencing. I refer to the time Vito shared some fraud order examples that had the email domain ancd.us. We had attacks with that info a year before. Maybe with this info, we could be on a proactive side if it benefits others. It's almost like we're reading each other's minds. We're simpatico. I want to start what Jamie calls the family chat among all of us. But in this world where there are so many competing platforms and all of this wackiness, I don't want to burden you with downloading some app that's just kind of wacky or doing something that you're not comfortable with. But I know this group should be in contact more. I need somebody to share my pictures of the chicken coop with, at the very least. Slack, I'm sure most of you work in, and it's nice to jump from workspace to workspace, and you can thread, et cetera, et cetera. Discord is very similar. WhatsApp feels a little funky sometimes, right? Those messages kind of disappear and whatnot. I would love to hear, if you're so interested and so inclined, about what your platform of choice would be like if you would like to take part in this Jamie TM family chat. So here's the poll. It looks like we're pretty heavy Slack. Do you have any Slack haters in the room? Do we have anyone who's absolutely not? No way, Jose, are we going Slack on this? It don't sound like we do, my friends. So there you
I've
go.
just never used it before.
Ben, you're going to be drinking from the fire hose here, my friend. Welcome to the. I was at the airport a couple days ago, and somebody's Slack was going off. And let's just say Amarillo International is not, well, it's not even international. Amarillo is not the place where you expect Slack to be going off. And I was getting the nom flashbacks. I thought I was still at work. I was like, oh no, what's going on? So someone mentioned other. I would just love to hear what that other would be. GeoCities. The old Facebook wall that was just a big text block. Not Teams. Yeah.
It's a pigeon, Vito, is what they were going with. Pigeon carrier.
Yes. Mike Tyson will help you out on that. He's an aficionado of the pigeons. Well, it looks like Slack wins, my friends. So expect a message from me soon, and expect at the very least next week, I will have that handy little QR code on here to give you an awesome distraction for your day-to-day and your copious free time when we know that you've got nothing else going on. You'll be able to interact with the likes of everyone you see here. You know what? We've got 2 minutes left, but it might take 2 minutes to get through this. I sincerely want to thank you for coming out this Wednesday. For all of you who are new here, especially my main man, Michael, it was so great to have you out. I think this conversation is very much the beginning of something great. You're going to be going through a very trying process over these next few weeks, especially as you get to peak season. You're going to want to prove that you're more than just a cost center. You're going to want to prove that you can cross thread, give others wins, and like Shelly says, get your problems fixed. So start now. Start with a little bit of inventory, a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of figuring out what is even going on behind the scenes. And just know that everyone here, I'm volunteering all of you, everyone here is always down to help. I'm especially down to help, so you could find me anytime. You'll find all of us very soon on Slack. And until that day, my friends, I wish you a sweet adieu, a great rest of your week. You are the light in my life, so thank you so much for that. Until next time, you have a beautiful rest of your day. Take care, y'all.